The soil felt different here, wrong somehow. Daniel Reed crouched in the freshly plowed field, letting the dark earth run through his fingers. 5 years on Verdant Prime, and he still couldn't shake the feeling that this world was too perfect, too eager to grow anything humans planted. Back on Montana dirt, you had to fight for every harvest. Here, seeds practically jumped out of the ground. He stood up, brushing his hands on worn jeans that had seen better days. The atmospheric tractor sat idle behind him, its engine ticking as it cooled. Daniel had been checking fence lines when he noticed the tracks. Big ones. Not storm bears, those left four-toed prints. These were different. 3 massive claws, each one longer than his hand, pressed deep into the mud near the ravine. The ravine itself was a scar across his eastern property line, a place where mining companies had ripped into the planet looking for rare minerals before moving on to richer deposits. They left behind a maze of collapsed tunnels, unstable rock faces, and chemical residue that poisoned the groundwater. Daniel had filed complaints, but Governor Halleck called it acceptable industrial impact and closed the case. Now something large was living down there. Daniel grabbed his rifle from the tractor, checking the charge. The weapon was designed for storm bears and rock serpents, the kind of predators that saw human livestock as easy meals. He walked carefully toward the ravine edge, watching for movement in the shadows below. What he saw made him forget how to breathe. A creature the size of a cargo hauler lay trapped beneath a collapsed mining scaffold. Copper-colored scales caught the afternoon light, shimmering like polished metal. A long neck stretched toward a small pool of stagnant water, but the creature couldn't reach it. One wing was pinned under twisted metal beams, the delicate membrane torn and bleeding. A dragon. Daniel had heard rumors. Colonists talked about seeing flying shapes at night, about livestock that vanished without a trace. The colonial government issued warnings about unidentified megafauna and told settlers to report sightings immediately. Some miners claimed they'd found nesting sites deep in the abandoned tunnels. But nobody talked about dragons being real. The creature's eye opened, a brilliant gold iris that fixed on Daniel with disturbing intelligence. It made a sound, low and rumbling, that he felt in his chest more than heard with his ears. Not a roar, more like words in a language that bypassed his ears entirely. Daniel lowered his rifle. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't attacking, it was dying. He climbed down the ravine wall using old mining cables for handholds. Loose rock clattered beneath his boots. The dragon watched him approach but didn't move. Up close, Daniel could see the creature was young, maybe not fully grown. Ribs showed beneath those copper scales. Deep scratches covered its hide, some infected and oozing. "Easy now," Daniel said, knowing the words meant nothing but needing to say something. "Let me see what we're dealing with." The dragon's nostrils flared. Smoke curled from them, but no flame followed. Too weak, Daniel realized. This creature was starving. He circled the trapped wing carefully. The scaffold had fallen during some long-ago accident, and vegetation had grown through the metal framework. The dragon must have crawled in looking for shelter or water and got caught when it tried to leave. Fresh blood showed it had been struggling recently. Daniel ran back to his tractor and grabbed every tool he had. Cutting torch, hydraulic jack, pry bars, medical supplies meant for livestock. He worked through the afternoon, carefully cutting away metal, lifting beams with the jack, talking constantly to keep the dragon calm. Had a horse once that got tangled in barbed wire. Took 6 hours to free her without making it worse. You're bigger than a horse, but the principle's the same. Don't thrash, don't panic, let me work. The dragon's eye never left him. When the last beam lifted free, Daniel expected the creature to bolt. Instead, it lay there, breathing heavily, watching him with that unnerving intelligence. Daniel pulled emergency rations from his pack. Protein bars, dried meat, anything with calories. He tossed them near the dragon's head. The creature sniffed them, then ate with desperate hunger. "You need real food," Daniel said, Wait here. He climbed out of the ravine and drove his tractor home. His farm was small by colonial standards, just enough livestock to supplement crop income. He loaded a dead goat onto the trailer, an animal that had died from natural causes that morning. He'd planned to process it for his own use, but this seemed more important. Back at the ravine, the dragon had moved to the water pool, drinking deeply. When Daniel lowered the goat carcass, the creature ate with savage efficiency, bones and all. Daniel sat on a boulder and watched the sunset paint the sky purple and orange. The dragon finished eating and looked at him again. This time, something changed. Daniel felt pressure in his head, like someone pushing gently against his thoughts. Images flooded his mind. Not words, but feelings and pictures. Hunger, pain, gratitude, and beneath it all, a question that formed in his consciousness like smoke taking shape. Why help? Daniel thought about his answer, not sure if the dragon could understand. He pictured his father's farm on Earth, remembered lessons about taking care of the land and everything on it. Because you needed help, he said aloud. That's reason enough. The dragon made that rumbling sound again, and this time Daniel understood it wasn't a growl. It was something like a purr, deep and resonant. He returned to his farm as darkness fell, his mind racing. There was a dragon on his property, a starving, intelligent dragon, and from the tracks he'd seen, there were probably more. The colonial government would want to know. Governor Halleck would send wildlife control teams. They'd capture or kill anything they considered dangerous. Daniel looked at his quiet farmhouse, at the fields he'd worked so hard to build. His father used to say that a farmer's first duty was to the land and everything living on it. He wouldn't be making any calls to the governor. The next morning, Daniel loaded more food onto his trailer and headed back to the ravine. The dragon was waiting for him at the edge, no longer hiding in the shadows. And behind the dragon stood another one, twice its size, with silver-gray scales and eyes that held centuries of memory. 3 weeks passed before Daniel learned their names. The silver dragon was called Forge, and the copper one was Sira. Not spoken names, but concepts that formed in Daniel's mind when he concentrated hard enough. The mental communication exhausted both species, leaving Daniel with headaches that lasted for hours and making the dragon sleep for half the day after attempting conversation. But they were learning. Daniel discovered the dragons were refugees, though that word didn't quite capture what they showed him. Images flooded his thoughts during their halting exchanges. A beautiful world with crystalline cities built into mountain peaks. Then darkness. Insects the size of shuttles, countless as stars, consuming everything. Dragons fleeing through gates of light while their world burned. The images always ended the same way. A white ship with blue markings. Humans in uniforms smiling, offering help. Then cages. Then this world, verdant prime, where the humans released them and left. We were supposed to be saved, Forge's thoughts rumbled through Daniel's mind. Instead, we are trapped. Daniel sat on his usual boulder while 17 dragons gathered in the ravine below. He'd been bringing food every day, watching them regain strength. But it wasn't enough. They needed to hunt, to fly free, to live as dragons were meant to live. The colonial government won't let you, Daniel said, not sure if Forge fully understood. They classified you as dangerous wildlife. There are movement restrictions, hunting boundaries, kill orders if you leave designated zones. Forge's response was a wave of anger so intense, Daniel nearly fell off his boulder. The old dragon's scales rippled with suppressed heat. We are not animals. We are older than your species, human. We built civilizations when your ancestors lived in caves. I know, Daniel said quietly. I believe you. That got Forge's attention. The dragon's massive head swung toward him, eyes narrowing. Then why do you help? Your kind put us here. Your kind made laws that cage us. Daniel thought about that for a long time. The sun was setting again, painting the ravine in shades of red and gold. "Different humans make different choices," he finally said. "The ones who brought you here meant well but didn't understand. The ones who made the laws are afraid. Me, I'm just a farmer who can't watch intelligent beings starve." Sira moved closer, her smaller form more graceful now that she'd healed. Her thoughts were gentler than Forge's, curious rather than angry. "What is farmer?" Daniel smiled. "Someone who helps things grow, crops, animals, communities. My father taught me that farming isn't about ownership. It's about stewardship, taking care of living things so they can thrive." He pulled out his data pad and showed them his farm registration documents. The dragons couldn't read human writing, but they understood images. Cattle, horses, even the exotic six-legged grazers he'd imported from a neighboring system. "These animals are registered to me," Daniel explained. "Under agricultural law, that gives them protection. They can't be killed or removed without my permission. They get access to large grazing ranges. They're exempt from wildlife control." Forge snorted smoke. "You wish to make us cattle?" "No," Daniel said firmly. "I wish to make you partners." He spent the next hour explaining his idea. Agricultural law on Verdant Prime was designed to encourage farming. It had broad exemptions for exotic working animals if they contributed to farm operations. If Daniel registered the dragons as agricultural partners, they'd technically have more freedom than they did as unclassified wildlife. "You would still be yourselves," Daniel said, "but on paper you'd be protected. You could hunt in expanded territories. You could fly freely. And in exchange, you'd help protect my farm from predators." The dragons exchanged glances. Daniel had learned to read some of their body language. Sira was interested. Forge was skeptical. The others were desperate enough to try anything. "This is deception," Forge said. "This is survival," Sira countered. "Pride will not feed our young ones." The argument that followed happened too fast for Daniel to track. Dragons communicated at speeds humans couldn't match, thoughts flowing between them in seconds. Finally, Forge turned back to Daniel. "If we agree, what happens next?" Daniel pulled up the registration forms on his data pad. "I file paperwork. The Colonial Agriculture Office reviews it. They'll probably think I'm crazy, but the law is clear. If you're willing to work with me, and if you don't pose a threat to other colonists, they have to approve it. And if they refuse, then we appeal. And while we're appealing, you have temporary protected status. It could buy us months." Sira stepped forward, her golden eyes locked on Daniel's. "You risk much for beings you barely know. Why?" Daniel thought about his father again, about lessons learned in Montana dirt, about the responsibility that came with having power over other living things. "Because it's right," he said simply, "and because I think we can help each other." That night, a storm bear crashed through Daniel's northern fence. The creature was massive, angry, and heading straight for his livestock pens. Daniel grabbed his rifle and ran, knowing he'd never reach the pens in time. He didn't have to. 3 dragons dropped from the sky like copper and silver meteors. Sira hit the storm bear from above, her talons raking its thick hide. 2 younger dragons flanked it, breathing fire that made the creature roar in pain. They didn't kill it, just drove it back through the broken fence and kept pursuing until it was far from the farm. Daniel found Sira perched on his barn roof afterward, a shallow cut across her shoulder. "Come down," he called. "Let me clean that." She glided down gracefully. Daniel used medical supplies from his livestock kit, antiseptic and bandages that worked surprisingly well on dragon scales. Sira endured his ministrations with patient dignity. "You saved my animals," Daniel said as he worked. "You saved us first," Sira replied in his mind. "This is balance." Forge appeared from the darkness, landing heavily in Daniel's yard. The old dragon studied the barn, the fields, the careful organization of a working farm. Very well, human Daniel, we will try your plan, but know this. Forge's thoughts carried weight like mountains. If your kind betrays us again, we will remember. Dragons always remember. Fair enough, Daniel said. I just hope I can actually pull this off. 3 days later, Daniel walked into the Colonial Agriculture Office and submitted his registration for 47 dragons as exotic agricultural partners. The clerk thought he was joking. The supervisor thought he was insane. Governor Halleck thought he was dangerous. The real fight was about to begin. The hearing room was too small for dragons, so Forge waited outside while Daniel faced the Colonial Review Board. Governor Halleck sat at the center table, flanked by lawyers and bureaucrats who looked at Daniel like he'd grown a second head. Let me understand this clearly, Halleck said, reviewing the documents on his data pad. You want to register 47 dragons, creatures we classify as potentially hazardous megafauna, as farm animals. Agricultural partners, Daniel corrected. There's a difference. Not one that matters to public safety. Halleck leaned forward. These creatures are dangerous. We have reports of missing livestock from 3 farms, unexplained fires in the Western Territories. They could kill someone. Daniel had prepared for this. He pulled up his own data pad, displaying incident reports from the past year. You're missing livestock, storm bears, DNA evidence proves it. The fires, lightning strikes during electrical storms. Every single incident you've attributed to dragons has another explanation. Meanwhile, I have documented evidence of dragons protecting farms from actual predators. He showed them footage from his security cameras. Sierra and 2 other dragons driving away a storm bear. A pack of rock serpents fleeing from dragon fire. Night after night of patrols that kept Daniel's farm safer than it had been in years. One of the lawyers spoke up. Even if they're not actively dangerous, the law is clear. Agricultural partners must contribute to farm operations in measurable ways. They do, Daniel said. Pest control, predator management, and heavy labor. Dragons can move equipment that would take me days with machinery. They can spot crop diseases from the air before they spread. They generate heat for controlled burns that improve soil quality. Halleck wasn't convinced. This is insane. You're asking us to treat sentient beings as property. I'm asking you to protect them using the only law that currently allows it, Daniel shot back. Unless you'd prefer to recognize them as sapient species with full rights. That created silence. Recognizing a new sapient species required Galactic Council approval, years of paperwork and political capital the colony didn't have. Halleck's face darkened. You're exploiting a loophole. I'm using agricultural law exactly as written. Daniel kept his voice steady. Those laws exist to help farmers. I'm a farmer. The dragons need help. The law allows this. Before Halleck could respond, the door opened. An alien entered, her feathered crest shimmering with iridescent colors. Daniel recognized Ambassador Tillith from news broadcasts. She was a representative of the Avian Confederation, one of the Galactic Council's founding species. Forgive my interruption, Tillith said, her voice carrying melodic undertones. But I believe this matter falls under Council jurisdiction. Halleck stood. Ambassador, this is a colonial matter. Perhaps, or perhaps it involves the treatment of a species that may qualify for sapient protection. Tillith moved to the window, where Forge was visible in the plaza outside. My species has legends of dragons. We thought them myths until 3 months ago when Council scientists discovered the refugees here. She turned back to the room. If these dragons demonstrate intelligence comparable to Council species, they deserve rights, not classification as wildlife or farm animals. But Mr. Reed's solution offers immediate protection while we investigate their status properly. Daniel hadn't expected support from the Council. Tillith gave him a small nod. I propose a compromise, the ambassador continued. Approve Mr. Reed's agricultural partnership on a provisional basis. Give me 6 months to study the dragons and prepare a formal report for the council. If they prove sapient, we begin the process of granting them proper status. If not, the agricultural arrangement stands. Halleck looked trapped. Refusing a council ambassador was politically dangerous, but approving Daniel's plan meant admitting the colony had mishandled the dragon situation from the start. Fine, he finally said. Provisional approval, 6 months. But if there's one incident, one injury, one property damage claim tied to these creatures, I'm revoking it immediately. Daniel left the building to find Forge surrounded by curious colonists. Children stared in wonder. Adults kept their distance but were watching intently. The old dragon's presence was drawing a crowd. We have approval, Daniel said quietly. Provisional but legal. Forge's thoughts rumbled through his mind. Your ambassador spoke for us. Why? I don't know. Maybe we should ask her. Ambassador Tillith emerged from the building, her feathers catching sunlight. She approached Forge without fear, studying him with scientific curiosity. Magnificent, she said. My people's ancestors flew alongside your kind before we evolved true intelligence, or so the legends claim. Forge lowered his head to her level. When he spoke, his thoughts were gentle. Your ancestors remembered truly. We knew the sky singers in ancient days. They were small but brave. Tillith's crest rose in surprise. You can communicate. With effort, Forge replied. In pain, our minds are not shaped for each other's thoughts. Over the next weeks, Tillith became a constant presence at Daniel's farm. She worked with Forge to develop better communication methods, eventually creating a translation device that converted dragon subsonic frequencies into speech humans could understand. The breakthrough came when Sira spoke through the translator for the first time. We remember our world. Her voice emerged from the device, soft but clear. We remember the cities in the mountains, the songs we sang to the moons. We remember the swarm coming, consuming everything. We remember humans arriving too late to save our world but in time to save us. Tillith recorded everything. More council observers arrived. Scientists studied dragon biology, culture, and history. And slowly, the colony's attitude began to shift. Lucy Chen, a teenager from the farming district, asked if she could visit the dragons. Daniel agreed with Sira's permission. The girl and the young dragon formed an instant bond, communicating through gestures and growing mental connection. Soon other colonists came. Some were curious. Some were apologetic. Some just wanted to meet the beings they'd feared and misunderstood. Daniel found himself mediating between two species, explaining human customs to dragons and dragon culture to humans. It was exhausting work, but he watched something beautiful emerge from it. Community. Then the long-range sensors detected ships entering the system. Not human, not any species the Council recognized. The Krellith swarm had found their prey. The hologram flickered in the emergency council chamber, showing 6 massive ships approaching Verdant Prime. Each vessel looked organic, grown rather than built, with chitinous armor and weapons that pulsed like beating hearts. Krellith swarm scout fleet, Ambassador Tillith said, her crest flattened in distress. Population estimate between 8 and 12,000 warriors per ship. Daniel did the math. Potentially 70,000 hostile aliens heading toward a colony of 3,000 humans and 47 dragons. The numbers made his stomach turn. Governor Halleck stood at the head of the table, his face pale. How long until they arrive? 4 days, Tillith replied. Maybe 5 if they slow to scan the system. We need to evacuate, Halleck said immediately. Get everyone to the transport ships and run. Forge's voice came through the translator, deep and resonant. Run where? The swarm does not forget. They have hunted my kind across a dozen worlds. If we flee, they will follow. Then we fight, Daniel said. The room erupted in argument. Colonists weren't soldiers. They had mining equipment and farming tools, not weapons designed for war. The colony's defense force numbered 50 poorly trained militia members with rifles meant for wildlife control. "This is suicide," one of the council members shouted. "We can't fight a swarm fleet." Forge stood, his massive form dominating the chamber even through the hologram. "You cannot, we cannot, but together perhaps we have a chance." Tillith pulled up new data. "I've been studying dragon biology. Their fire isn't ordinary flame. It's a controlled plasma reaction that can be modulated to different frequencies." She looked at Forge. "That's why the swarm hunts you, isn't it? Your fire can penetrate their bioarmor." The old dragon's silence was confirmation enough. "Then we have something they fear," Daniel said. "That's more than most species can say." The vote was close, but it passed. Verdant Prime would stand and fight. The next 3 days transformed the colony. Daniel worked with Forge and the human engineers to design defensive positions. Dragons could provide aerial superiority, but they needed ground support. Humans could build fortifications and set traps, but they needed firepower that could actually hurt the swarm. The solution came from an unexpected source. Grant Murphy, the mining foreman Daniel had clashed with over the ravine pollution, approached with an idea. "We've got hundreds of mining charges left over from the extraction operations, shaped charges designed to crack rock. If we modify them with dragon fire for ignition, we could create weapons that punch through bioarmor." Daniel and Grant spent 18 hours working on the first prototype. Sierra provided precise flame control to test ignition sequences. When the charge finally detonated against a test target, the explosion carved through 3 meters of reinforced material. "We can work with this," Grant said, grinning despite his exhaustion. Lucy Chen wasn't old enough to fight according to colonial law, but she wasn't leaving her dragon friend. She and Sierra developed aerial reconnaissance patterns, teaching other young colonists to ride dragons for scouting missions. It was dangerous and technically illegal, but Halleck had bigger problems than enforcing age restrictions. Ambassador Tillith used her council authority to access military databases, finding everything known about Krelith tactics. She discovered they relied heavily on pheromone communication and coordinated swarm behavior. Disrupt their command structure and the whole force would falter. "Their ships have organic coordination centers," she explained to the command group. "Living brains that direct the swarm. Destroy those and the warriors lose cohesion." "How do we reach their ships?" Daniel asked. "We don't have fighters or assault shuttles." Sierra stepped forward. Through the translator, her voice carried determination. "We have dragons, and captured Krelith technology from previous encounters. We know their drop pod frequencies." The plan was insane. A strike team would use a captured Krelith drop pod to infiltrate the command ship. Dragons would provide cover during insertion. The team would sabotage the coordination center, then extract before the ship's defenses recovered. Daniel volunteered immediately. So did Grant and 3 other colonists who had military experience from before settling Verdant Prime. Sierra insisted on going, and Forge didn't even bother arguing. Ambassador Tillith surprised everyone by joining the team. "My people have combat training," she said calmly, "and council law requires I document first contact situations. This qualifies." The Krelith fleet arrived on the 4th day, their ships blotting out the sun as they entered orbit. The first communication was a recorded message in broken galactic standard. "Surrender dragon specimens or face extermination. You have 1 planetary rotation to comply." Daniel was standing with Forge on a hill overlooking the colony when the message played. Below them, humans and dragons worked together on final preparations. Children too young to fight were being moved to shelters deep underground. Everyone else was taking positions. "Any regrets?" Daniel asked the old dragon. Forge's laugh rumbled through the translator. I have lived for 3 of your centuries, human Daniel. I have seen worlds burn and species fall. I have watched my own kind scatter and hide. He turned his massive head to look at Daniel. But I have never seen 2 species come together like this. If we die tomorrow, we die proving that cooperation is stronger than the swarm's hunger. The first drop pods began falling as night descended. They came down away from the main settlement, testing defenses and probing for weakness. Dragon fire lit up the darkness as Sira and her flight intercepted several pods midair, tearing them apart before they could land. Those that reached the ground met prepared defenders. Human weapons and dragon fire, working in concert, destroyed the Krelith warriors before they could establish positions. The colonists learned what their enemy looked like up close. Insectoid bodies covered in segmented armor, mandibles that could shear through metal, multiple limbs ending in bladed appendages. An intelligence in their compound eyes that showed these weren't mindless bugs, but thinking beings who'd chosen predation as a way of life. The night battle raged for hours. Casualties were light on the defenders' side, but the swarm was learning their tactics. Tomorrow would bring the real assault. Daniel managed a few hours of sleep before dawn, then checked his equipment one final time. The strike team would launch during the main attack, using the chaos as cover. Sira found him in the pre-dawn darkness. Her scales were scarred from the night's fighting, but her eyes burned with determination. "Ready?" she asked through the translator. "No," Daniel admitted, "but let's do it anyway." The Krelith came with the sunrise, thousands of drop pods falling like deadly rain across verdant prime. Daniel watched from the captured pod as the sky turned black with descending enemies. His team was crammed inside the small space: Grant, Sira, Tillith, and 2 ex-military colonists named Rodriguez and Kim. "Launch window in 30 seconds, Rodriguez said, hands steady on the pod's organic controls. The Krelith technology felt wrong, pulsing, and warm like living flesh. Below them, the main battle erupted. Dragons wheeled through the air, intercepting pods with fire and claws. Human positions opened up with modified mining charges, explosions tearing through Krelith armor. The defenders had prepared well, but the sheer numbers were overwhelming. 10 seconds, Kim counted down. Daniel checked his equipment one last time. Demolition charges built from human and dragon technology, medical supplies, a recording device Tillith insisted on bringing, and his father's old knife carried more for luck than practicality. "Launch," Rodriguez triggered the pod. They shot upward through the atmosphere, the pod's biological systems masking them as just another Krelith descent vehicle. Daniel's stomach lurched as they accelerated, then the terrible pressure of high-speed flight pressed him into the restraints. Through the pod's viewing membrane, Daniel saw the command ship growing larger. It was massive, a living fortress of chitin and bone that dwarfed anything humans had built. Weapon ports lined its surface, currently firing down at verdant prime. Each shot carved burning scars across the landscape. "They're targeting the nesting grounds," Sira said, her voice tight with rage. The pod shuddered as they approached the command ship. For a terrible moment, Daniel thought they'd been detected. Then the pod's recognition systems activated, broadcasting captured Krelith identification codes. The ship's defenses held fire. They penetrated the outer hull through a receiving bay, the pod settling among hundreds of others. The door unsealed with a wet sound. Daniel stepped into a nightmare. The interior of the ship was alive. Walls pulsed with circulation systems. Floors were covered in some kind of organic membrane that shifted under his boots. The air was thick, humid, smelling of rot and chemicals. Krelith warriors moved through corridors in organized streams, heading to drop bays for deployment. "Coordination Center is 3 levels up," Tillith said, consulting the Council intelligence data on her device. "Central axis, heavily guarded." They moved fast, Sira providing cover with her smaller dragon form. The Krellith they encountered died quickly. Grant's modified charges punched through bioarmor like paper. Rodriguez and Kim fought with military precision. Tillith's talons proved surprisingly deadly. But they were making noise. Alerts began sounding, pheromone signals spreading through the ship. "We've got maybe 5 minutes before this whole place locks down," Grant said, setting charges on a bulkhead door. The explosion revealed the coordination center beyond. It was a chamber 3 stories tall, dominated by a massive organic brain suspended in nutrient fluid. Thousands of neural connections ran from it to every part of the ship. Krellith technicians scurried around monitoring stations, their compound eyes widening in shock as the strike team burst in. Daniel didn't hesitate. He threw 3 charges at the brain's support structure, while Grant targeted the neural connections. Sira unleashed dragon fire, the plasma burning through organic systems faster than they could regenerate. The Krellith technicians attacked, but they weren't warriors. The strike team cut through them, racing to plant all their explosives before defenders arrived. "Charges set," Kim shouted, 30-second timer. That's when the floor erupted. A Krellith warrior twice the size of normal soldiers pulled itself through a newly torn opening. Its armor was darker, thicker, covered in battle scars. A leader, Daniel realized. Maybe the fleet commander itself. The creature spoke, sounds that the team's translators rendered into harsh words. "The dragon who scarred me on Talaxis, I remember your flame." Forge's voice crackled through their communicators. "Harvester, you live still. And you will die here, Ancient One, along with your new pets." The massive Krellith charged at Sira. Daniel threw himself in its path, firing his rifle at point-blank range. The shots barely slowed it. Grant tackled Daniel aside just as bladed limbs slashed through the space where he'd been standing. Sira met Harvester's charge with dragon fury. Fire and chitin clashed in the center of the coordination chamber. The other team members fought off regular warriors pouring in from every entrance. Rodriguez fell, a Krellith blade through his shoulder. Kim dragged him behind cover. "Timer at 15, Tillith shouted, her feathers singed from near misses. Daniel realized they weren't going to make it out. Too many enemies, too little time. He looked at Grant, saw the same understanding in the other man's eyes. "Get to the pod," Daniel ordered. "I'll buy you time." "No way," Grant started, but Sira's roar cut him off. "Go, both of you. I will handle Harvester." Daniel wanted to argue, but the timer hit 10 seconds. Grant grabbed him and ran, half dragging, half carrying him toward the exit. Kim supported Rodriguez. Tillith flew above them, her council recorder still documenting everything. Sira's final roar echoed behind them as they reached the pod. Dragon fire so intense it turned the coordination chamber white. Then the explosion started, tearing through the organic brain and its connections. The pod launched itself from the dying ship as chain reactions spread through the command vessel. Daniel pressed against the viewing membrane, watching for any sign of Sira. She burst from the ship's hull in a shower of debris, her wings beating hard despite visible damage. Behind her, Harvester's fighter emerged, the commander refusing to let his ancient enemy escape. "He's following us down," Kim said, tracking the fighter on sensors. Daniel's hands clenched. They'd succeeded in the mission. The command ship was dying, its coordination systems destroyed. Below on Verdant Prime, the Krellith ground forces would be losing cohesion. But Harvester had a personal grudge centuries old, and he was bringing it straight to the planet's surface. The pod hit atmosphere, shaking violently. Through the flames of re-entry, Daniel saw Verdant Prime spread below. The battle was still raging, but the Krellith attacks had become disorganized. Without central coordination, they were fighting as individuals rather than a unified swarm. The defenders were winning. The pod crashed in the valley where this had all started, where Daniel had first found Sira trapped and starving. The team stumbled out, weapons ready. Harvester's fighter came down half a kilometer away, the impact shaking the ground. The massive Krellith emerged from the wreckage, damaged but still deadly. And facing him, waiting on the same rocks where Daniel had once offered food and kindness, stood Forge. Harvester moved across the valley floor like death given form. His bioarmor was scorched and cracked, but still functional. Bladed limbs scraped against rock as he approached Forge. "Ancient One," the Krellith said through his translator, "our battle was interrupted on Talaxis. 300 years I have waited to finish it." Forge lowered his head, smoke curling from his nostrils. "I remember Talaxis. I remember how many of your kind burned." Daniel tried to move forward, but Grant held him back. "This is between them." "No," Daniel said, pulling free. "This is about all of us." He walked into the space between Dragon and Krellith, his rifle lowered. Behind him, Sierra landed despite her injuries. The rest of the strike team fanned out, weapons ready. "You want Forge," Daniel said to Harvester. "You go through us first." The massive Krellith's compound eyes focused on Daniel. Brave for such a small creature, but humans are weak, soft. You cannot stand against the swarm. "Maybe not alone," Daniel admitted. "But we're not alone anymore." Harvester attacked. He was impossibly fast for something so large. Bladed limbs swept toward Daniel, who dove aside. Grant's modified charge detonated against the Krellith's side, opening a crack in the armor. Sierra's fire poured through the gap. Harvester roared in pain and rage. He grabbed Grant, lifting the big man off the ground. Daniel fired his rifle at the Krellith's eyes, forcing him to drop his friend. Kim and Ambassador Tillith attacked from different angles, their weapons finding weak points in the ancient armor. But Harvester had survived 3 centuries of warfare. He adapted, shifted, began targeting the humans with precision. Rodriguez, already wounded, went down again. Kim's shoulder was gashed open. Then Forge entered the fight. The old dragon moved with speed that belied his size. His talons raked across Harvester's back, seeking the gaps Daniel's team had created. The Krellith spun, trying to engage both enemies at once. Dragon fire met bioarmor in explosions of superheated plasma. Daniel saw the pattern. Harvester was defending his left side, favoring it. An old wound, maybe from the Talaxis battle. He signaled to Grant, who understood immediately. They coordinated the next attack. Sierra drew Harvester's attention from above. Grant hit his right flank with explosives. Daniel went low, diving between the Krellith's legs to plant charges on the damaged left side. The explosion staggered Harvester. Forge's jaws closed around the Krellith's neck, his dragon fire burning from the inside out. Harvester fell, ancient armor finally failing. His last words hissed through the failing translator. "The swarm remembers. Others will come." "Let them," Forge said. "We will be ready." The old dragon collapsed next to his defeated enemy, breathing heavily. Daniel rushed to his side, already pulling out medical supplies. Sierra joined them, nuzzling against Forge with gentle concern. "You stubborn old worm," Daniel said, hands shaking as he examined the dragon's wounds. "You could have died." "Worth it," Forge rumbled. "To fight alongside instead of alone. Your father was right, farmer. Growing communities is important work." Above them, the Krellith fleet was retreating. Their command ship destroyed, their commander dead, and their ground forces shattered by the coordinated human-dragon defense. The remaining ships fled into faster-than-light travel, leaving their stranded warriors to surrender or die. The battle for Verdant Prime was over. The next weeks brought change that rippled across the galaxy. Ambassador Tillith's recordings documented everything. Humans and dragons working together, defending each other, forming bonds that transcended species. The Galactic Council watched in fascination. A formal delegation arrived to meet the dragons. After extensive interviews, The Council granted them full sapient status with territorial rights on Verdant Prime. They were no longer refugees or farm animals, but citizens with legal protections and representation. Governor Halleck resigned, replaced by a council that included both human and dragon representatives. The colony's name officially changed to New Haven, reflecting its role as sanctuary for multiple species. Daniel's farm became the center of something unprecedented. The human-dragon cooperative model expanded, with more colonists forming partnerships similar to what he'd started. Lucy and her dragon friend Ash pioneered aerial farming techniques. Grant worked with dragon metallurgists to develop new alloys. 6 months after the battle, Daniel stood in his fields at sunset. The crops were thriving, mixing earth plants with native verdant prime species in ways that benefited both. Dragon hatchlings played in the irrigation channels while human children chased after them, all of them laughing in their different ways. Sierra landed beside him, her wing fully healed, thinking deep thoughts, farmer. Just remembering how this started, Daniel said. Finding you trapped in that ravine. I thought I was just helping one injured creature. You were, Sierra said, but you were also changing everything. Forge approached, moving more slowly these days but still commanding respect. Your Galactic Council wishes to expand this model, he said. Other refugee species need sanctuary. They ask if New Haven will accept them. What do you think? Daniel asked. I think, Forge said slowly, that a farmer's wisdom applies to more than crops. Nurture what grows, protect what needs protecting, build communities that last. Ambassador Tillith joined them, her crest gleaming in the fading light. The Council is proposing something called the New Haven Protocol, agricultural partnerships between humans and refugee species across multiple worlds. They want Daniel Reed to help design the framework. Daniel laughed. I'm just a farmer from Montana. I don't know anything about galactic policy. You know about bringing different beings together, Tillith said. You know about building trust. That's what the galaxy needs right now. A young colonist ran up, breathless. Daniel, we've got visitors. 3 ships just arrived claiming refugee status. They call themselves the Chorus, and they're asking if we have room for singers. Daniel looked at Sierra, at Forge, at the community they'd built from impossible beginnings. He thought about his father's lessons, about duty and stewardship, and nurturing life in all its forms. Tell them yes, he said. There's always room for those who need help. That evening, New Haven held a celebration. Humans and dragons shared food and stories. The newly arrived chorus, crystalline beings who communicated through resonant harmonics, added their voices to the gathering. Children of 3 species played together while their parents discussed crop rotation and patrol schedules. Daniel sat with Forge on their usual rocks, watching the community below. The old dragon's thoughts were gentle in his mind. Your kind has a saying, home is where the heart is. We do, Daniel confirmed. I understand it now. This place, these beings, this work we do together, this is home, not because of location but because of connection. Daniel smiled. You're getting soft in your old age. Perhaps, or perhaps I am finally learning what strength truly means. Forge paused, then added quietly, Thank you, human Daniel, for seeing people when others saw only beasts. Thank you for giving me a chance to prove humans could be better. The twin moons rose over New Haven, casting silver light across fields worked by multiple species. In the distance, dragons and humans continued their evening patrols, protecting not just territory but family. Daniel Reed had come to Verdant Prime to farm. Instead, he'd grown something far more important. A community built on trust, cooperation, and the simple belief that helping others was reason enough. The galaxy was watching, and slowly, other worlds began to understand that humanity's greatest strength wasn't technology or aggression. It was the ability to see potential where others saw problems, to build bridges where others built walls, and to nurture life in all its infinite variety. The story of the farmer who saved dragons had just begun.